Alright guys, hope you all had a great weekend and you're keeping safe. Now the Summit PvE mode coming with Season 3 has quickly become the main talking point within the community, which is to be expected. And today I wanted to really kind of have a look at the good and the bad, because it has potential, there's no doubt about that. But like anything, there's room for improvement, a lot of improvement to be frank. If you enjoyed this one and you want to support me, the best way is to watch until the end. Drop a like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. And with that said, here's my feedback so far. Now on Friday I spent about 8 hours watching multiple streamers attempt the new Summit game mode. I watched people in groups, I watched solo players like Solid FPS for example, mainly because I'm a console player, so I don't actually have access to the PTS, and whilst I do have the Warlords of New York DLC on PC, you're not unable to actually access the PTS without first completing the DLC campaign, which I've not done, and those 2 points are probably something I'm going to talk about in a future video. I did have access to a private server before the PTS, so with that in mind and kind of taking into account all the feedback that I've seen on forums and Twitter, and there is a lot of it, let's talk about the good and the bad things. Now I'm not going to be talking about the numerous bugs, I just think that's pretty irrelevant at the moment because it's a PTS. But before I do that, however, Yannick has today been on Twitter addressing some points, so I quickly want to read his kind of statement, as it were. So he said, "I'm seeing a lot of great feedback on the Summit. I know there's still work to do and we're committed to keep improving it for TU11 and beyond. I'm also seeing confusion on replayability, and that's something we haven't clearly communicated, so here's my attempt to clarify. You only need to play floor 1 to 100 once. We have permanent checkpoints, rally points, every 10 floors, and every subsequent run can be started from any of those floors. Floors 11, 31, 71, etc. You will not have to go through the initial floors again if you don't want to. We currently do not plan any reset of your unlocked rally points, so once they're reached, they are yours forever. However, this is a point on which we'd like feedback. Would you like to see regular resets? Just to stop that there, absolutely not. With the current system in terms of difficulty, having weekly resets would be a very bad idea, and I'm going to come on to that more shortly. You'll see why that would be a bad idea." He goes on, "Elevators can go both up or down to and from those rally points. When you reach a new rally point, you can decide to go down to a previous one with the elevator. You will then enter a new iteration of those floors and be able to fight through those once again." So in short, the way we've envisioned replayability for Summit is not for you to go from floor 1 to 100 repeatedly. Instead, it will be you picking the floor that matches the difficulty you like, making it as far as you're comfortable with, and then decide if you want to try yourself to a more challenging difficulty or keep playing at the difficulty you enjoy and be rewarded for it accordingly. For instance, if you like heroic, you can start at 51, that's heroic with no directives, work your way towards 60, at which point you can decide if you want to go to 61, that's heroic with 1 directive, or stay where you are and select 51 again. You can rinse and repeat this process as much as you want without ever having to leave the Summit, or go back to a terminal to pick your difficulty and modifiers. Each time you go back down, the floor templates, enemies and objectives will be picked randomly again. Of course, rewards and gameplay need to be interesting enough to keep you hooked this long, and there needs to be enough variety in the room setups and environments. This is part of the improvements we need to make and will keep making in the future. But floor 100 does not need to be the end goal of every one of your Summit sessions. The Summit is meant to be much more flexible than that. Alright, so with this tweet in mind, I do think this all but confirms the Summit mode will not be delayed any longer than the PTS, even if it's not up to scratch, because Yannick confirms iterating on this mode after TU11 goes live, although I'd expect them to do that anyway. This is something I'm not sure the community was going to be happy about. I did this poll earlier today, you can check it out, so you can kind of see where people are coming from. So what good is coming from this mode and what bad is there? Let's take a look at that, and let's start with the good stuff. So the good stuff in my opinion are the idea of the game mode is awesome. When we first learned about Skyscraper, this large vertical object where you can kind of climb floors, the mode itself sounds awesome, and it offers something we've not had before, and that's that vertical replayable content. In the Division 1 we had Underground and Resistance, they were very much on the ground, or underground for underground, but we've not had this experience of climbing before, and so the whole idea is a good one. It is challenging as well for even the best players, but due to the difficulty scaling with the floor levels, anyone can play. So it's not kind of being, it's not just for the 1% like the raid, for example. This is a mode that anyone can play, and it can be as challenging as you want, up to level like floor 91 and stuff. That's really going to be for your top 1%. I'm probably never going to get there, but that's a good thing because, if you do want to challenge yourself, you can, but if you don't, you don't have to, and that is good. Without being negative though, that's really all I can say about what's good right now. And that's mainly because most other things need to be worked on. And that's not to say that they're bad, although some are. But right now, a lot of what's in the mode needs work. So let's look at that. Targeted loot. Right now, I believe the targeted loot is Hannah Yu and I think Overlord. And this is for the entire Summit mode. Now, having one targeted loot for the entire mode has to change. And thankfully, I think it will during this PTS. One of the biggest replayable driving factors is going to be targeted loot. Being able to decide exactly where you're going to farm for the piece of gear that you want is something that we all want to do, and you can do that in the open world. You can go to the Dark Zone to get that piece, or you can do that mission to get that piece. Summit has to offer a similar experience. Otherwise, players, they're just going to farm elsewhere for the gear that they need, and this is what this game's all about. It's all about getting gear and loot. If you can go this place and get that gear, you're not going to care about the Summit. So you need to have this experience within the Summit. Now, there's plenty of ideas out there to kind of fix this. For example, every 10 floors you can select the targeted loot for the next 10 floors, or as you're playing you collect like a new currency, and every 10 floors you can purchase any brand, weapon, mod, or gear set cache that you want, similar to what the Division did. The devs have to get this part right specifically. It's so crucial to this mode being replayable, among other things like environments. This one, again, is important. One of the most important feelings of this mode is the feeling of actually climbing a skyscraper, and yet there are no windows. Without them, the only indication you're actually getting of climbing is some stairs, and then the floor number, which really doesn't do it. Not just that, but each floor looks very similar in terms of the environmental design. The palette, the objects and rooms, they all look the same, making each room feel more like a warehouse than an office floor actually. Most rooms have incredibly long lines of sight, meaning that most encounters take place with an M1A at about 30 meters to each enemy, so each encounter feels very similar, even with objectives. And whilst the rooms are randomly generated, there are only about 9 rooms, maybe a little bit more. So, but the point is, you quickly see all of them when you've got 100 floors. I'd like to see a much lighter palette, some windows for sure, so that you get a sense of scale, some smaller rooms as well, some cluttered rooms, and just overall the feeling of being in a skyscraper and not a warehouse. Objectives. Now, there's about 5 objectives within the Summit. You've got this click this laptop and protect the area, protect the hostage, destroy the servers, hacking the warhounds, clear the room, and another one, I believe. Now, protect the hostage on Legendary looks to be frustrating because it relies heavily on the AI not standing in the open. With that said, it does offer a real challenge. Destroying the servers likewise can become quite difficult in the later stages because of the warhounds being immune, but all in all, there's just not enough. Having only 5 means that throughout a 100 level run, the chances are you're going to see each activity 20 times, and that's just way too much, just way too repetitive. I did see a forum thread of someone who listed another 15 different activities that I think the devs can do, and they sounded interesting. And with that in mind, I believe the devs should increase the number of activities fourfold to about 20. The more we have, the better the chances of you potentially not even experiencing the same activity twice through a run, and that would be really great. Rewards. Now, aside from targeted loot, everyone will want to play for the rewards, for that incentive. You want to be rewarded for the time invested. Now, Yannick actually mentioned in his tweet about rewards, but right now there's only one reward people will play this for, and that's a new exotic tied to the mode. Even with that one reward, the uptake will be very low, because the quest required to get the new exotic is only obtainable from reaching level 100, meaning 99% of the player base will not be getting any meaningful rewards from Skyscraper aside from targeted loot. Now, don't hear this wrong. Don't get me wrong here. There absolutely has to be a reward for reaching level 100, and an exotic is great, and I think that's needed. But there has to be other rewards as well. Full vanity sets of whatever combinations with unique vanity tied to their completion, or something else like that. More exotic secret items purely tied to RNG, etc. So that you keep playing. If I knew there was a chance of maybe some type of special item dropping via RNG, I would say more than just one. But if I knew there was a chance of that, along with targeted loot as well that I wanted, I'd farm this all day, even without the environmental changes and activity changes I mentioned. I'd farm it just for the loot itself, because at the end of the day, for me, the aesthetics are not that important in terms of the gameplay and the loot. That's what I want. I want loot, and I want a lot of it. And I want new stuff, and I want that feeling of something dropping that it's got such a low chance, but it drops, and you're wowed, and you're playing the game for that reason. And unfortunately, unless you're getting to level 100, you're not going to get that. All you're going to get is targeted loot. You might get the odd die here or there, depending on what level you're going up to. Aside from that, there's no other rewards. Difficulty. Now, one of the biggest bits of feedback I've seen is the ability to set the difficulty yourself. Not decrease the difficulty though, just allow you to increase it. The same applies for directives. I recently tweeted with a concern of mine when it comes to the Cool Skills Directive, which is automatically applied late on in the summit. I think it's legendary with 4 directives. Now, my problem is that this one directive effectively removes any skill builds from late play. My hybrid build relies on having both my skills active, but this would destroy that. The same for Pistolero. This directive just forces you to play all red build with an M1A, and that's it. Unless you're in a group, and you'd probably have a healer or a CC player. Solo players, you're going to be forced to use one build only, and it's going to be a red build with an M1A. I don't believe that should happen. And just like Underground, I think you should be able to decide when and what directives you want on. Obviously, there could be a combination tied to the directives. You could get increased XP, maybe even increased targeted loot drops, but some reward for having those directives on. Otherwise, people are just simply not going to have them unless they just want to do it for the difficulty. But I do believe we should be able to pick the directives like Underground in the Division. I don't think they should be forced on us. To end on a positive note, I do think the devs can make this mode great. I really do. And I think they will in the long run. I hope it's a short run, but I do think they will in the long run. They need to focus on what makes it replayable, then focus on the environment perhaps. Like any game, in my opinion, how the game plays always outweighs how the game looks. And I think that's the same for anyone. You can look at something like Minecraft. It doesn't look great, and most people who don't play games look at it and think, this game's 200 years old. But the actual gameplay loop is so addictive, and that's why it's such a good game. And I think that's what the developers need to focus on more. They need to focus on the actual gameplay experience first, and then go to the aesthetics. So if they do take any of this video into consideration, please do not focus on the environmental stuff first. Please focus on the stuff that makes it replayable. Thanks very much for watching today's video. If you stuck around until the end, I really do appreciate the support. Tomorrow, I'm going to have the weekly vendor reset video. So until that video, stay safe and epic out.